Welcome to the SOLIDWORKS Enterprise PDM webcast. My name is Bill Mitchell. I'll be doing the presentation. This webcast is going to cover using Enterprise PDM CAD Editor, both within Windows Explorer and within SOLIDWORKS. The version being displayed that we're working with is SOLIDWORKS Enterprise PDM version 2011 and SOLIDWORKS 2011. So before we get started, we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the terminology that we want to use. Whenever we're working with PDM, and I guess I'm going through this just if you're new to PDM, I'm going to be using some of the terminology in the menus and so on, so I want to clarify what is meant by those items. Whenever you're working with files, you can check out and check in files. Whenever you check out a file, that is indicating that you're obtaining read-write access to the file. And whenever you do that, you prohibit other users from getting read-write access. If they can still access it, but they can access it in a read-only way, and they're not going to see any of the changes that you're making on your local computer. Whenever you check something in, you're committing the changes to the vault and adding a line item to the vault history, or to the file history, and then at that point other users can reload your changes if they happen to have a read-only version loaded on their computer. It's important to note whenever you're working with the PDM system that the modified files remain local on your computer until they're checked in. One of the differences between Enterprise PDM and Workgroup PDM is the idea of versions and revisions. Whenever you check out a file, that brings a local version of the file to your local cache or to your local hard drive. Whenever you set up Enterprise PDM, you designate a vault view, and depending on your credentials and your user account, the visibility that you have to the folders and what you can do within the vault is what's going to be displayed. So whenever you check out a file, it brings a local version to your local cache. If you have a file checked out, as I said, nobody's going to see the changes until you check it in. If you don't have it checked out, you can always get the latest version through the right-click menu and also within the SOLIDWORKS interface. Latest version would be something that somebody modified, checked in, and then you can pull that version down. The difference between Workgroup and Enterprise on the PDM side is that a version isn't necessarily a revision. A revision is a formal part of your workflow. It's something that is a purposeful step in your document process. A version is just the incremental changes between the two files. So you can always get the latest version, but by checking in a file, you're not necessarily forcing a new revision onto the file. It's also important to note that Enterprise PDM doesn't alter the way that SOLIDWORKS manages file references. If you have files of duplicate names on your system, and say for example you have a part named baseplate, and you have that part open, and then you check out a file or even open a file from the vault, and that file or that assembly is looking for a part called baseplate, it will load the one that is active in memory. And so using unique file names helps with this issue. It's not necessarily a requirement, but it's just, I guess it's important to note that Enterprise PDM doesn't change the way that SOLIDWORKS manages files. So the first part of the webcast, I'm going to go ahead and get into Windows Explorer. If you've been using Windows operating system for a while, then this should seem like a fairly natural transition if you're new to PDM. In the Enterprise PDM 2011, there was an interface update, which I'll cover that a little bit. Whenever you're looking at the files, you can see on the slide there's the screen is split. You can split it horizontally, vertically, but you've got a series of tabs on the bottom that change as you select each one of the files. So you have a preview tab, which gives you a preview of the document, whether it be a SOLIDWORKS document, Microsoft Office, Excel, spreadsheet, Word doc, 3D via Composer document, those types of things are each going to have their own preview. You have a data card. The data cards themselves are customizable, and each data card can be file type specific, meaning that you can have different metadata for each file type. A Word doc is not necessarily going to need the same amount of information collected on a per file basis that maybe a SOLIDWORKS model would. You have a version tab, and the version tab is going to show you your local version versus what's in the vault. And then you have some bill of material type functionality. Obviously a bill of material tab, which is going to show if it's an assembly, what's in the BOM, and then you also have contains and where used. Contains is similar to bill of material in that it shows you what is in the file. So if you have references, or for example with the SolidWorks assembly file, you can see what that assembly file contains. A where used is going to show you where that document is used by other files in the vault. So if you have a subassembly, that subassembly, if you select the where used, is going to show you what the parent assembly is. Same thing for part files. If you have a part, it'll show you what assemblies that were, where that particular part file is used. Some quick interface, Windows Explorer interface conventions for Enterprise PDM. The folder colors. And the folder colors have, each folder color has a different meaning. If the folder is green, that means that you have access to the folder in the Vault database. If it's blue, it indicates that your Vault view is in offline mode, which I'll show you how to toggle back and forth on that in a moment. If the file is gray, it means that it's local and doesn't exist in the Vault. And then a yellow folder would be a file that's not in your local Vault, and it doesn't exist in the Vault database. Some of the other functionality is toggling between looking at files and bills of material, looking at file history, using copy tree, which is similar to Pack and Go if you've been using SolidWorks for a while. You can create user-defined references, and we'll talk about searching, and then also how to transition things from workflow step to workflow step. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my Vault view. This is my local view, and again, this is indicating green file folder is indicating that that item's in the Vault. These items are local, so they're not in the Vault yet. I double click on that. You can see that each one of my folders also has a data card. And again, this is all customizable through the Enterprise PDM administrator application. So you can see that I've got project number, project name, and so on. If I select a document, I have different variables or file properties that I'm tracking for this particular Word doc, and again, that's going to change from a Word doc to a SolidWorks assembly file. One of the conventions as it relates to configurations with SolidWorks files is that you have the @ symbol, which is indicating that that is the active configuration when it was checked in, and then if you have different configurations, those will be listed along tabs on the top. Same thing with drawings. You can have sheet 1, sheet 2, and so on, and then part files. Typically, if there's not more than one configuration within a part file, then just the default configuration will show, and these values will be the same. So, for example, I'll go ahead and just select a part file. If I go to Preview, you can see that I get a thumbnail preview. Over on the right side are all the different variables that I'm capturing about this particular part. These variables, again, are defined in the Enterprise PDM Administrator application. If I right-click on this, I've got several different right-click menu options. I can also go to Tools, Display, and Options. Just for performance reasons, it's typically a good idea to show bitmaps for SolidWorks files, but you can also switch to an eDrawings preview. And the advantage to that is if you show a bitmap for SolidWorks files, it doesn't necessarily have to load the eDrawings client or the eDrawings program every time that you cycle between drawing files. So if I left-click on this in this area, it takes a moment, and then eDrawings pops up. At this point, I can rotate around. I can measure, so I can take measurements if there's some value that I need to interrogate the part for. I can do that through this interface without actually having to open the file at all. Again, going to Tools Options, selecting Show Full UI in SolidWorks Preview means that this toolbar is going to be active. You have similar functionality with composer files. If I select a 3D via composer file, I also get the preview. I can rotate this around, and I have a menu system that allows me to rotate the model and kind of look through it. Going to my version tab, you can see I have local version and latest version, the local revision, local state. Now, if someone else checked out the file, modified it, this value would be different, the latest version versus my local version. If they checked it out, modified it, checked it back in, my latest version would roll to 2. My local version would still be 1 unless I refreshed it. I can always get the latest version by right-clicking and selecting Get Latest Version, and that'll pull down the latest version from the vault. If I select a part file, I can go to its bill of materials, and you can see I have a bill of material, any configurations, and then what version. If I select my version, I can select, see what occurred at each version. Going to an assembly file, which is actually going to have more information, I can select the bill of material, what configuration I want to work with, what version, and then I get a quick bill of material of showing what the items are. Working from left to right, I can save the bill of material, which I'll get into that in a moment. Saving a bill of material allows you to kind of create a line in the sand in your bill of material development. So if you need to add things like grease or tape or bubble wrap or anything of that sort that's not going to necessarily be modeled, you can add those things to a bill of material. Take a snapshot of what the bill of material is in SOLIDWORKS, and then that would have its own workflow activity. I can open this list as a CSV file. I can hide the tree, so if I select this button, you can see that it toggles. And going down to maybe a more complex assembly file. You can see that I've got nested sub-assemblies in this as well. I can change the way that the bill of material is displayed, selecting indented parts only, or just the top level. As I mouse over each one of my items, you can see I get a thumbnail preview of what that item looks like. I can search my bill of material. So if I search for the word pin, it shows the next occurrence where the file name or the part number or anything that's displayed contains those values. I can compare bill of materials, so I'll get into that in a moment. I'll go ahead and save out a bill of material to show this functionality. So if I select Save As, call this maybe pre-production review. So now what I've done is created a separate file for my bill of material. You can see that I have different bill of materials displayed from my pull-down list, but if I come up to my file view, you'll notice that there aren't any bill of material files, and that's because that's shown in a different display. So if I come up to display, I have two values: show files, those are going to show the files that are in the vault; show bill of materials, they're going to show the BOMs that have been kind of a snapshot of my bill of material of my assembly. I can add numbering, so I can add position numbers. I can increment in lots of 10 and then show position numbers, and you can see whenever I do that, it shows an indented bill of materials. So for my top level, for my first BOM item, it says 10. Since these are indented values, it's 10.10, 10.20, and so on. Whenever it comes across the 8th item, which is a sub-assembly, I have 8.10. Within this sub-assembly is another sub-assembly, and so you can see as it rolls out, it just adds another period with another 10 value. If I right-click, I can insert a row above. I can also insert a child row. So if I insert a child row, see that it indents it. I'll call this plating. So this item, you can see that it is green. The key down here at the bottom tells me that this has been an edited value, but it's not been saved. Same thing for my item numbers. So if I now select Save, right-click, check this in. I'm going to check in a document, which means that other people are going to be able to see it. also keep it checked out in this process, which means that I'm logged in as a user named Ian, which means that Ian is going to retain ownership of that file. So now whenever I select the file, you can see that item is now black, which means that it's been saved, the change that I created has been committed, and I've got two versions, the original created version and then the version that I just modified. I can compare those documents if my change were more involved. I can compare bills of material between the two. So this item, I can select the version that I'm selecting is the pre-production, so I want to compare it to my created version. And then it shows me in green the items that were added. And then any items that I deleted would be in red as well. Select Exit Compare Bomb to remove that. So that is that's the bill of material functionality. If I right-click on this, I can look at the history. You can do this with the looking at the file history is different for parts or for files versus bombs. But I can select created, checked in. You can see which one of these can review what's going on with this. So going back up to display, I'm going to switch back to my file view. And since we were just talking about file history, let's take a look at maybe modifying a file real quick, and then we'll take a look at how to modify or how to examine the file history of those parts. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this assembly file. Right click, open. So right away it tells me that I don't have ownership of this file. This would be useful if I just wanted to modify or if I didn't want to modify the file, I just wanted to take a look at different items in the assembly. So I'll go ahead and open up ReadOnly. What this is doing is loading up all the files, and because I don't have ownership of them, they are going to be read-only. And you can see up in the title bar of the application, in brackets, it says read-only. So at this point, I don't have my Enterprise PDM add-in turned on. So to turn on add-ins, select add-ins, Enterprise. If you're going to be using it, obviously you would probably have Startup turned on. That turns on the add-in, adds a tab at the bottom. So now this is the SolidWorks interface. We'll get into I'll kind of bounce back and forth a little bit, but just to show a difference in the files as it relates to file history. I can right click on this, check it out. I can also check it out from the button here. So now when I check it out, removes the read-only attribute and then allows me to edit the file. Some of the different conventions with the icons in Enterprise. This pencil icon is indicating that the file is actively being edited. The gray equals icon is indicating that the file is the same as what's in the vault. If the item is bolded in black, it's indicating that it's in memory, if the file's open. Sliding over a little bit, it shows me the workflow state, and then the child info. The child quick info is looking at if there were a change to any one of the children. You can see that those items are being edited. The things that are approved or that I don't have access to are not actually actively being edited, or that there aren't any children for those items. Because this is a subassembly, I do have access to those. And then it gives me a brief description. If I right click, maybe insert an item from the vault. I notice that the application also has the interface within the Enterprise interface within the File Open dialog box. So I can look at this. If I'm not sure what this item is. I can get information directly from the File Open dialog box. If my resolution were a little bit better. There we are. You can see I get a preview of that. So at this point I'm just going to drop this into the assembly. Now if I save this, go ahead and save, you'll notice that my icon changes from the gray equal to the green icon that's indicating that this is newer than what's in the vault. If I come up to my pull down menus, go to Options, and then go to View Setting, a short key as to what each one of those icons means is located. You can see that the local file is newer than what's in the vault, which is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and check this file in. Add a comment. And then I want to elect to keep it checked out. So because I'm not done with it yet, but I do want the addition of that part file to be shown in the bill of material for anyone else that might be looking at this assembly. Go ahead and check that in. Should probably check this one out as well. It blocked me, or I said it couldn't find the item because I didn't have ownership of both of them. It actually caused a problem. So coming back over to Windows Explorer, if I select this item now, as it relates to file history, which is kind of the whole reason we went into that, is go to Display and then select History. You can see that the two items, and actually it looks like it did add the version, checked in, and you can see some of my rollback activity. Now if I want to go back to a specific point in my development history, I can always select rollback. If I close the model, I won't, actually let's go ahead and show that real quick. If I close the model, I can roll back to this version. Since this is a redundant version, I can roll back. Right click, undo checkout, which is going to release ownership. Coming back into file history, I'm going to roll back to remove that redundant version. What that does is it rolls back and it gets the version, which is going to be version 3, that removes that redundant version, and it also leaves a footnote that indicates that the item, indicates that I did roll it back. So going looking at the assembly file, I have version 3, local version 3, there's no revision, and it's still waiting for approval. If I look at my bill of materials, I can still compare bill of materials, or I can look at bill of materials for model, mirror components, and so on. If I want to see what my bill of material was at version 2, I can do that. Go into version 3. See that that file is there. So going into the other tabs, as far as the Windows Explorer interface goes, I can select Contains. When I select Contains, it shows the files. There is a warning that says the file has not been rebuilt. It didn't rebuild it. I select that. It tells me the new yoke file that I added, it needs to be rebuilt because I added that file, which I can always do that later. You can prohibit people from checking in files with the Vault Admin, the Enterprise Admin application. You can prohibit them from checking in files in this state as well. Shows me how many of the items are there. If if any of them are checked out, what version. So version 1 of 2 is used in my assembly. I can also select where used. If I scroll down and look at maybe this new yoke part, it does show me in an indented fashion that the new yoke file is used in this top level assembly. Right click, get latest version. So now the latest version from the vault is on my local computer. So if I want to copy this file, say that I want to take this assembly file and send it to a contractor. If I go out to my desktop, I'll add a new folder. Coming back into my vault. Select the file, go to Tools, and then select Copy Tree. When I select Copy Tree, I can select files, or copy the files to a specific folder. I can also put them in a compressed or a archive, which would be a zip file. This is much like the pack and go and then add to zip in one step. So I'll just copy them to a folder, add them to my extracted assembly folder. I can grab latest versions of references, which means that it's going to grab whatever the latest version is of the file, or I can use the attached version, meaning that whatever the as-built condition was of the assembly is what it's going to use. So I'll go ahead and use the latest version. I need to go ahead and close that out of SolidWorks real quick. Inadvertently double-clicked. Let's try this again. Tools, Copy Tree. Then I'll go ahead and copy that file. Coming back out to my desktop, extracted assembly, you can see all the files have been copied out. So now these items are separated from the vault. One footnote is if I have a need to go all the way back to the root of the vault, I can always come up here. If I'm using Windows 7, I can also select this button, which takes me to vault root. So that's just one of those kind of interface idiosyncrasies that is kind of hard to find a place to talk about. So going back into my assembly file, or back into the vault, let's talk about creating user-defined references. So for example, this Word doc. If I want to create a reference between items that don't typically have a natural reference, meaning something that would be like a SolidWorks assembly file, it's going to maintain its references to part files, those types of things. But if I want to create a reference manually, perhaps I want to create a reference between this Composer document and my Word doc. All you need to do is right-click, select Copy, check that out, right-click, paste as reference, it creates the reference. So now when I select my Word doc, I need to check this in first. Added reference to Composer document, go ahead and check that in. So now you see the indented relationship. Coming back to the Composer document, where used, you can see that it is used in the docx file. So that's a quick way that you can create references. Again, I can right-click, copy this, check out this assembly file, right-click, paste as reference, The next time I check that in, it will have a reference. So now my assembly file references my Word doc references the composer doc. I can also copy this, paste this reference, so that everything references this assembly file. So that's kind of the quick intro to Windows Explorer interface anyway for Enterprise PDM. Some of the other things that are as far as the interface goes, all your pull down menus, you can check in, get latest version, get a specific version, undo checkout, pretty much everything that is on your right click menu. Same thing, check in, get latest version. I select modify, again the same things that are on my right click menu, cut, copy, paste as reference. Display is going to show files, show BOM, history, and I can also change my interface, whether it be split horizontally or vertically, preview placement, bottom, and then the options, which we covered a moment ago. Going into tools, I can get into search, which is going to be our next topic. I can notify, I can select notify also through the right click menu. Depending on how you have it set up, you can have Enterprise set up to use an SMTP server, which means that it would basically go to your Microsoft Outlook in most cases, or you can use the built-in database mail service as well. But you can notify or tag a file, notify you whenever an item's checked in, checked out. So from a managerial point of view, would be good to monitor the workflow of a given document. Copy tree, clear local cache. You should do that periodically if you are getting file errors or you're not able to see what other people are doing clearly. You should probably clear the local cache. You may want to do that periodically anyway. Work offline. We talked about this earlier. If I select work offline, what it does is it prepares my vault view for a basically so I can see things, but it's not going to get back in. You can see it's not going to have everything. The folders are blue. I can't check in or check out these documents without being online, but it does show me the information about the file. If I had a local version, you can see on this version where I didn't have this file, but I do have this file, I still can't get to the information. I can get a preview because it is local. I do have it checked out. And the reason is that if I'm in offline mode, the data cards, versions, bill of material, those types of things are requiring a connection to my database. So to get back online, tools, work online, connects me back to my database. That's now the functionality is available as far as my BOM versions and those types of things. So let's talk a little bit about, going back over to my PowerPoint, the SOLIDWORKS interface. We already discussed checked out, checked in, and versions. We need to talk about changing states, searching, and then some of the other stuff as far as the interface goes. Let's go to my recent docs, grab this file. So now you can see a thumbnail preview of the item as it was in the last time that I checked it in. Shows me a local version, who it is checked out to, where it's checked out at, workflow states, and so on. One of the common questions that we get in tech support is what happens if someone accidentally checks something out and they leave the company, or maybe a computer crashes with files that are local checked out or locally checked out on another computer. If you use the built-in admin account, you can log in and undo checkout. Only that built-in admin account can do that. So that's something important to note, is that if somebody, the computer crashes or they leave take the files off-site and there's no way to retrieve them, the admin account can undo that checkout activity. So let's go ahead and make some more changes. I'm going to undo the auto show and just do a quick So what I'm going to do is search for a file called link. I can do that through this interface. I can do a complete search. I can build custom searches, but I'll just do a complete search. And it should bring up the search application. I have all my different vault views, so if I have multiple vaults, I can do that. Do a complete search. When I do that, I can search based on name and location, kind of a standard Windows search. I can search by cards, maybe a SOLIDWORKS part card. So I found the link that I want, so I can kind of minimize this a little bit, pull this over. Now because this search is active, it's not a static view, I can left click, drag and drop this item directly into my assembly for my search results. And when I do that, put this into place. I'll modify my mirror component feature to include that new link. And so now I've got something that links those items together. Switch back to my previous display state. So now I can look at my search again. Maybe I have another need for a pin, so I can search for maybe workflow for items that are approved. And it shows me a combination of everything that is in my vault that has the word link in it. That is in a state called approved, which happens to be the same items as before. So I'll go ahead and drag that in. Kind of position this a little bit better. Okay, so now I've made some changes, and I guess for the scope of what we're talking about, the changes aren't really all that important. I'll go ahead and check this in now. Added link. Check that in. So now if I'm ready to submit this for approval, right-click again. It was already in a state called waiting for approval. So what I can do is go to change state, and suppose I have the authority to approve it. So I can say passed approval. Whenever it passes approval, let me cancel this and do a rebuild. Right click, check this item out. Now at this point I should be able to I didn't need to check that. I mean undo checkout before I transition it. right-click change state from this point, or I can also change state from this menu. Say past approval. Now the icon that I'm getting, which for some reason there's a rebuild, but whatever, files in wrong state. This is one of the issues that we get a lot whenever people call in and they ask, why am I getting files in the wrong state? It's because this particular past approval for the transition is applying to this particular assembly as well as any of the other items that are not in that state. Whenever it says files in the wrong state, that means that these items are already approved, so I don't need to pass them through that, which is fine. You can prohibit that again from your vault. So now going into the workflow state, the item's approved. So to kind of give you some context as to what we mean by workflow, I'll go ahead and get into the Vault Admin application. Within my Vault Admin, I've got several different items. I can create a workflow that allows me to create something that's under editing, waiting for approval, and then I can loop through this, or I can completely sidestep this, coming down to no approval required. Waiting for approval selects past approval. I can change on a transition by transition basis what group or what users have authority to do that. But at this point my documents are in the approved state. Now my next step, suppose I had an engineering change, I would, provided I had appropriate permissions, I could request a change. So looking at this assembly, I can right click on this, request a change. Did not mirror pin. So I can do that, come back in, mirrored that pin. Then I'm going to check it out. Check it back in with the changes. Then I can say mirrored pin. So now at this point it's under change workflow. I can right click, change state, submit change for approval. Please review. Should be correct. So now at that point it comes back to change pending, which is part of my workflow. So you can very quickly, through the SOLIDWORKS interface, cycle through those items. Some of the other things that you can do is you can show the item's card, look at each one of the cards directly from the vault without having to open the file or go out to Windows Explorer. If there's any toolbox references, I can update those. For this item, I can do a where used. It queries it and it shows that it's used in this assembly in both of these configurations. If I need to know where, or if I want to save out a where used, I can export this. There's a number of different options I can do with this particular export. I can also zoom to selection, so if I see an item in the tree and I'm not sure where it's at, I can zoom to selection and it zooms right in and also highlights it in the SOLIDWORKS feature tree. And I can also open those documents, and again, coming over, I can search. So to finish up the SOLIDWORKS interface, from the pull-down menus, go to Options. Some of the server-side settings that you can select, you can be prompted if a modifying a file is checked in, show the data card, prompt to check out files if it's open in read-only mode. If you get aggravated by the pop-up and you become more experienced with the application, you may want to check that off. You can show the task pane, or show this extra pane, which is what this item is over here. top of the feature manager tree, so you can split the feature manager. And add a tab over here if you prefer that. I think that might be a little bit crowded. So coming back over to enterprise options. I prefer it to be in the task pane just because it seems like a natural place to put it. You can also have a default vault set up if you have multiple vaults. If you have serialization turned on or have serial number generator within your vault, you can select what serial number generator to use. And some other things, view settings, arrow buttons on your keyboard up and down through the rows, display instances of parts, display instances of assemblies, what information you want to display, and then again the icon key until you get used to using enterprise. So that is about it for Enterprise PDM. There are a lot of options, and depending on how your vault has been implemented, some or all of these may be in place. This is kind of a generic top-level overview that wouldn't necessarily be vault specific. Pretty much the only thing in this webcast that would be specific to my setup are the labels and the workflows, but otherwise this is a very generic Enterprise PDM implementation of my system. Thanks for watching the webcast. If you have any questions, go ahead and email support@ddicad.com. We'd be glad to answer your questions for you. Thanks for watching. Bye.